Good morning, Tucson. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Creative City Show here on 1030 The Voice with me, your host, Zach Yensers. Every day, Monday through Friday, 10 to 12, we share the stories and strategies of the people and ideas shaping Tucson's future. And along the way, we envision, we debate, we discuss the issues and themes critical towards getting us to that future. A future that I believe is closer around the corner than we know, and with a potential that is greater than we give ourselves credit for. And on the show, we talk about the creativity, the innovation, and all that is required to get where I think we know we can get as a community. So welcome to another week. Welcome to our live lines. Welcome to the opportunity to engage in that conversation. I was just sharing with my guest in studio today, who I will introduce in a minute, that live radio, local radio especially, is really seeing a resurgence or continued maintaining of how strong it has always been, because in this world where we have every possible media platform available to us at our fingertips, discussing national news and global news, local radio is still the engine that allows for real-time conversation and feedback around the issues that matter the most to us. And that's what we get into here on the show each and every day. So 790-2040 is that live line number. Give us a call. Also, new to the show, we've talked about it a little bit, we are now on YouTube Live, so you can watch the show as it goes on. You can watch the conversation as it happens. Just go to kvoy.com, and there's a new tab called Watch, and you click on that and you can see the show. It kind of will remind you a little bit of the Howard Stern show maybe, or the Breakfast Club, where there's kind of a video feed happening. So kind of cool there. Another option for you, and you can engage with this conversation at your viewing or listening pleasure. All right, today, Monday, we're kicking off strong. In the studio, the next few minutes with me is Barbra Coffee, the Economic Initiatives Director here for the City of Tucson. We'll get into that in a minute. Then at 11, new housing contributor on the show, Andres Portela from the Southwest Fair Housing Council, will come in to talk about housing issues in Tucson. We can get everything right in Tucson if our housing situation is equitable, accessible, and affordable. I think we'll keep struggling over the long haul. It's just one of those. It's not the holy grail. It's just one of those things that we absolutely have to get right, along with a variety of other things to make sure that our community can move forward sustainably. So that's our show for you today. Without further ado, one of the other things we got to get right in any community, this is not just a Tucson thing, and Barbra Coffee has 20 plus years of experience in the field. Barbra Coffee, Economic Initiatives Director, thank you for being in studio. I appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Zach. I'm happy to be here. It's funny, when I remember early days in radio, we used to say, I have a face made for radio, and now you can no longer say that now. With the YouTube live feed. So, yeah.
Right. Well, now you can say I have a voice made for TV. So
okay.
we can.
All right. Well, we'll just flip that. Exactly.
we can flip it. And that was one thing that was funny. What we learned about each other when we first sat down here is that this show is going to be an easy Monday show for me, because you're an old radio hand. You've been around this for a long time and have had some experience in it along the way. So always fun.
It was a fun way to start out a career, and it's really served me well, because, as you know, the communication skills
Absolutely.
Are everything, and being able to make relationships with people and build those relationships to build capacity in your community, that's everything. So it is great. And it's good to be back in the studio.
Absolutely. Well, I hope this is not the last time either. I'd love to have you on, and it's so important. So just you are new-ish to Tucson. You were hired officially in February, so it's getting on there. It's not like it was last month, but it's new-ish.
Yes, off and running. It's almost 6 months now, and no rest for the weary. There's a lot going on in Tucson. It's a great time to be here, so I was glad to join a team that's really growing and doing some amazing things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, our city manager, Michael Ortega, has brought me on, and we have a slew of new directors at the city, and so there is quite a team coming together and taking advantage again of the momentum in the city, the vast amount of development that's happening right now. It is really exciting to be part of.
Yes. So you're about a half year in here in Tucson, but you have had a really long and distinguished career in the field. Could you catch our listeners up who may be listening to you for the first or second time, and what you've been up to and how you got to Tucson?
Sure, yeah. Career has been economic development in a local government setting, and so pretty much every stop I've had has been with the city. And I started out as a Texas Main Street manager, so I did downtown revitalization through historic preservation. So a lot of work in both urban and 9 during the boom times when that city grew from 30,000 to 60,000. About the time the economy took a turn in 2009, and so I took a director role in the metro Atlanta area with the city of College Park, Georgia, and learned a great deal there. That was a really good experience, a politically challenging environment. So I always say I grew a stomach of steel during that period of time, but you learn how to navigate quickly and you finesse your way through a lot of exciting things. So we did that. When I saw the opportunity in Henderson to move back west, I did that. It's been an amazing 6 years. Henderson was a great spot for me to be, and saw a lot of growth and opportunity coming there post-recession. And now I get to continue to do what I love to do, and do it here in a city that, again, is over 500,000 people. And I get to continue to do economic development in what I say is a really exciting time where we've got a lot of momentum. And in particular, a lot of great things happening in the downtown.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. I want to get your thoughts on something a little bit down the road here in our interview, and that would be, I think Tucson is unique in that it has 4,000 years of continuously inhabited history. Cities like San Antonio are embracing this idea of retropolitan, basically that their future is really defined by their past and that neither are separate from each other. And so when you said that you had that experience of development with preservation in mind, I want to get to that in a little bit, because I think that's one of the major topics in Tucson, as you've probably as you've probably become very well aware of. And in your role, you lead business attraction, retention, expansion, and small business and entrepreneurial development. Is it kind of those three pots, or is there some other things that it involves? Or
so you've touched on really three core program areas. There's a fourth, but I really like the fact that we're working in all of those areas at the same time. So when we're recruiting new industry, that's important as we build the clusters and we strengthen the economic activity around what's already here. Then we're working with existing industries to help them grow and expand and stay in the community and retain those jobs. And as I always say, that is 80% of the new jobs in your community come from existing industry, the industry that's already here. So that's exciting. And then the small business and entrepreneurial development, it just touches on the fact that we want to be able to create an ecosystem where entrepreneurs can thrive, where small businesses have the support they need, where they have access to capital and connections to be successful, and we help facilitate that. And so we want to be sure that we're connecting folks to the right resources so they can get what they need to be able to stay here and grow and not feel like they're going it alone, right? Becoming part of that fabric of the community. And then the fourth thing is really everything around redevelopment, revitalization. Yep. As our commercial corridors are aging in the city, it's important that we are taking sort of a special look at those, and we're bringing up all areas of the city all the time and not leaving any one area into decline. And so that is what I call sort of the redevelopment bucket. But there's also a focus here in Tucson on annexation, and I also have that under my purview, that anything to grow and enhance the tax base of the community is part of what we do in economic development.
I'm live in studio with Barbra Coffee, the Economic Initiatives Director for the City of Tucson. 790-2040 is your live line opportunity to engage with this conversation. I know the economic state and the economic ecosystem of Tucson is of a high priority to our listenership over the years, and this is your chance, Tucson. You have the half a year in Economic Initiatives Director Barbra Coffee in Studio 790-2040. And it's interesting, those buckets that you mentioned. That small business maintaining and development is kind of the engine that keeps things going. I was told the other day that in general, the startup and entrepreneurship ecosystem is the creator of most net new jobs. And so when we talk about not just maintaining a job pool but adding to that pool, that's the bucket that we have to be really watching. Has that been your experience over the many years and places you've been in this business?
It's a very special bucket, right? So it is important because we are growing our own, right? We're cultivating new activity, new jobs, new business. And so it's very special. It's very unique in that way. And it typically comes with a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, and with that, a lot of need, right? And so your entrepreneurs who may be very passionate about what they have created or the idea that they have that they want to bring to life, they may need a lot of support along the way. And so what we want to do is be sure that they're connecting with folks who may have some expertise or experience or some know-how that they need to shore up on in order to keep going and to build that business the way they want to.
Yeah. I have, we're going to get into some nuts and bolts in the second segment, but I want to ask one final big picture question. And I think the fun part, at least from my perspective on this interview, is that you don't have the baggage that somebody who's even been in Tucson 5 or 10 years has. So I almost feel like I can ask you critical questions.
Okay, I love it.
in a way that doesn't implicate you or the office, because you're
brand new.
That's so right. This isn't about you. This is just right. Kind of what's on your mind coming in. So we're going to get into some of that, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Here's my maybe last question of the segment, just getting to know you. When you came in to Tucson, when you either for your interview or as you settled in the last 6 months, what's the one thing that you look at Tucson and go, man, this is such an asset to the economic and business community? And then what's the one thing that you go, we'll put the positive spin on this, but our listeners will know where we're going here. What's the area of opportunity, right? What's the one thing that you're like, man, this city just doesn't tap into this and it really should? So what's the asset? What's the area of opportunity?
Well, you asked, when I came here, what was my first gut reaction? What did I see that really inspired me? And I will tell you that Tucson has what most communities are trying to get.
Okay.
Tucson has arts and culture. Tucson has history. Tucson has diversity. So the fact that that is present in a community, that it is not fabricated, the fact that it is authentic, that it's real, and that your community has protected that and really honored that, I think that is what, when I've been in place to place, city to city, I find, especially in newer cities, who don't have that history. They didn't have the building architecture. They didn't have the commitment to arts and culture, and they're trying desperately to get that. Tucson has that, and that is a very magical piece of the equation, because when it comes down to industry and business locations and talent making choices about where they want to live and work, they're looking for those things that they identify with. And they look for communities that have meaning and that can contribute to some meaning, and that look and share an image that they want their company to be about. And so I think that, when you talk about sustainability and sort of preservation and energy conservation and the things that a lot of people care about today, companies want to identify with that. So I would say that that's a great thing, and that helps us attract here in Tucson. So the other question was, what do we need to do? And it's funny, you brought up the word baggage. And I do say that it allows me to be somewhat new and have a fresh perspective coming in. And I will tell you that no city's problems are really that unique, right? Every community goes through some similar growing pains and similar challenges, and we all, deal with them. And we just map on some nuances of how we approach that. But I think one of the things I've noticed here is that we have to be better salespeople. Tucson has to own itself, right? Own its greatness and be excited about what's happening here, and not worry about, the whole, I call it stepsister to Phoenix, or this sort of, in the shadow of something else, and not worry about what everybody else is doing, but just own what it is what's happening here and tell that story. Because the more we focus on the great things that are going on and we tell the story and we shine a positive light on the industry and activity that's happening here, the more people are going to want to be a part of that. And so I think that is a critical opportunity, and that's what you'll see me spend a lot of time on, the marketing efforts for the community.
Super. Well, this sets us up perfectly for our next segment, because what has kind of been on my mind lately is what draws people in to Tucson. I think is exactly what you mentioned. But statistically, it hasn't always kept people here, and I think it comes a lot to the very stuff that you work on day in and day out, of making sure that there is opportunity here, that there is appropriate redevelopment around preservation that maintains that unique factor, that there is an openness to small business and an openness to jobs, and what gets people here may not always keep people here, and so we have to have the back end work that your office does, in my opinion, to. Another host on this station last week almost called it, like, if you think of like an ice cream sundae, right? The stuff on top works when the ice cream is in the cone. But if the ice cream is not in the cone, then the toppings just don't have as much strength.
Right.
And those toppings would be sustainability, diversity, arts, culture. All those things are such a draw to Tucson, but we got to have our engine revving to make all those things work. So when we come back from the break, I'm so anxious to pick your brain on issues of small business growth and support. I want to also talk about something that's been swirling around the community, and that is redevelopment in the urban core and some issues around that. And we'll just talk about the whole litany of things that you work on. Barbra Coffee, Economic Initiatives Director for the City of Tucson. And Tucson, 790-2040. What's on your mind? Have a question? Give us a call in. We'll be right back after the break here on 1030 The Voice. Tucson, welcome back to this Monday edition of the Creative City Show. With me, your host, Zach Yenser. As every day, we share the stories and strategies of the people and ideas shaping Tucson's future. And we have such a person with such ideas as a guest here in the studio today. Barbra Coffee, the Economic Initiatives Director for the City of Tucson, is our guest today. 790-2040 is your opportunity to also be a guest by calling in and asking a question or providing a comment. Barbra has been in the city for about 6 months now and brings a wealth of experience without the baggage, but is a quick learner. I think that's the ideal combination, right? Is
yes.
You don't have the baggage, but you're learning so fast what's up in Tucson.
Yes,
so.
It's been fantastic, really, meeting everyone. That's part of it, right? Is getting to know who's here and what they're working on and what's important to them, and then finding a way to make sure that everybody can kind of get what they need to be successful. So so it's been fun. It has been great to learn and meet everyone.
For sure. Well, I in advance asked if there were a few things that I could ask you here on the air that you are able to speak to. And one of those is, we're going to talk small business friendliness and support. Okay. We're going to talk kind of your vision for the future of Tucson as you get into your role more and more. What are some things that you're really wanting to drive? What are some things that you learned in other cities that maybe can apply here to Tucson? The GPLED, for example, is an incentive that applies to especially urban core redevelopment, and that GPLED, if I'm not mistaken, was just expanded a little bit beyond the past borders. Could you speak to some of the costs and challenges that are around commercial development, commercial redevelopment? So many people ask, are those incentives locally necessary? Do they have ROI? All in the context of how does it impact kind of our urban core communities and neighborhoods? Very thick topic there.
Sure. And to clarify, so the Central Business District, we did propose an expansion, but it is not complete yet. There's a process that has to be, we have to go through in order to certify the area such that we can continue revitalization. And that's what that program was really designed to do. The government property lease excise tax program with the 8-year abatement in the Central Business District by state statute in Arizona was designed to draw activity and reinvestment in an area that needed it. And I would say that you've been quite a beneficiary of that here in Tucson. There's been a lot of development in the historic core. There has been attention to sort of drawing some new life back into that area with the mixed-use development and other things that brings a number of people, right? I call it feet on the street, brings that density back to an area that helps all the other businesses thrive. So I would say to your question about incentives, are they important in this economic cycle? Is it still something we need? I will tell you that companies and investment businesses and development that's looking at a community, they don't make their decisions based on just an incentive package, right? It's typically one piece of the puzzle or one item. What an incentive program does allow your community to do is basically be an open invitation for business and basically be a welcome for that kind of investment and shows a business or a developer that, yes, we want you here. We want you to make this investment. We want you to be part of the community and grow jobs and add that activity. So I would say that is the most important piece, is that in terms of what an incentive program does. There are many communities who do not have those tools in the toolbox. And I would say when you're really talking about large industry, when you think about a Hexagon Mining or someone or a Caterpillar that's trying to come into your community, when you are competing against multiple sites across, 3 or 4 states and communities that might be even maybe more robust than yours and have more access to workforce, when you're competing, you want to be sure that you check all the boxes in the matrix that the site selector is going through when they make those decisions. And incentives is just one box in that chart of things that they're looking for. And we want to be able to have a check mark in that box. So that's kind of how I liken it. You still have to have great access. You still have to have workforce. You still have to have K through 12 education and other things that communities deem important. And you have to be able to say what's going on in those areas to highlight that. But I would say, and to your point about costs going up and the challenges with development, you're right. Margins are tight. Construction is prevalent everywhere now, and so people can choose where to invest. And this just gives them one more reason to take a hard look at Tucson when we have something to offer.
Barbra Coffee, Economic Initiatives Director of the City of Tucson. One of the things that's been getting a lot of research lately, at least on the academic side, is kind of the knife's edge that incentives often put communities in when it comes to especially relocation of companies. I think it was the United Airlines headquarters in Indianapolis. I think I'm getting that right. Cities often feel like they are in competition. They kind of roll out the red carpet and then sometimes feel left holding the bag when the private industry has to make a market-based decision whether to continue or to stay in a community. You've been in this industry for a while. How does a city like Tucson make sure that it's making good choices and offering good incentives that really retain companies over the long haul? What's your philosophical view on that?
Well, I think the key to retention is being able to talk to your companies and know what their needs are, the challenges that they're facing, the issues that they have. And if you know that, if you're in relationship with them to be able to identify where their challenges are going to be, then you can try to address them early on. So having a formalized business retention program is your early warning signals, right? That's how you get in touch with where you need to improve or what workforce training needs to happen. Where are the skills gaps that need to be addressed so that they can expand and add 200 jobs or whatever the case may be. Sometimes it's real estate driven. Sometimes it's, can they expand? Do they have room to expand where they are? And if not, how do we motivate and mobilize so that we can find an appropriate place for them to expand? So it's just being ahead of the game. And when you have a focused program for economic development, and when you're talking to your companies and your business people in the community, that's how you know that. So that's how I would say retention is extremely important, and we don't want to lose the jobs that are already here.
I have two, hopefully, brief questions and answers. Boy, as the more we talk, the more comes into mind that I just want to ask you, and we have a limited time. Tucson has built a reputation over time, it would seem, internally, as not being small business friendly. In 2011, when Mayor Jonathan Rothschild ran and won election, he made this one of his big themes, that he wanted to make the permitting process, he wanted to make the startup process, he wanted to make the support of small business more of a big deal in Tucson. Stepping into the role that you are now in the last 6 months, what are some ways that you would like to see Tucson better support the startup, maintaining, and success of small business in Tucson?
So we definitely want to remove barriers, right? So nobody wants to hear that government just is all about red tape. We want to remove that, right? We want to make it easy for someone to get to the business of business, right? And get to the job of creating jobs. And so the quicker we can do that and remove barriers and obstacles, the better off we're going to be. And that's what's going to make us a business-friendly community. So I would say there have been a lot of changes even before I got here. Our new Planning, Development, and Services Department and now Director, led by Scott Clark, along with our folks at Tucson Water, really got together and are creating now what will be a one-stop kind of opportunity for businesses as they come through the permitting process. So that will streamline things. We'll have digital plan reviews going on. We'll have a way to get questions answered that might have taken a lot longer in years past. So we're gonna be addressing that thing that I call time is money. Because that is one of the best incentive, is getting people to open doors faster. So removing barriers. And I think just by, again, being visible, raising the visibility, sending a message that we are pro-business, but then doing what we say we're going to do, right? So we have to mean that. It can't just be, as you talked about before, sort of the icing on top of the ice cream cone or whatnot. It has to be real. We have to have a foundation there where we've a proven track record, and we're showing businesses that we can get them through the process. And so what our office will do is advocate for that, right? So we will follow the business along through those processes and make sure that they are getting the answers they need in a timely manner.
What is something that you've seen done or that you've led in other communities you've worked in that have messaged we are pro-business, that maybe Tucson could implement, and maybe through your efforts here with the Economic Initiatives Office?
I think a lot of it is getting involved, right? We found, I'll give an example of Henderson, Nevada, where I was during a time where, we really looked at skills gaps in the community. If we were going to be a community that attracts tech or any kind of tech sector, even fintech or, all the new varieties because it crosses industry sectors. But if we were going to have those skills in our community, we needed to do something about it, right? Because there was definitely in Clark County, Nevada, a large gap in the sector of computer occupations. So your network engineers, anybody with certifications for those kinds of things were hard to find. So with the help of statewide programs like the Governor's Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology, we leveraged some dollars through a Workforce STEM Challenge grant, and we created an IT boot camp to address that. And we put graduates through a cohort that then took people from start to finish, and within 8 weeks, they were able to better their career positions, they bettered their skills, and were able to fill jobs, for example, by new companies, by our matchmaking process of putting now the new skilled worker in connection with a local employer. And it was extremely successful. And so I think we have to be creative in the things that we're looking for to address that, and continue to work with the partners that are already in the community helping do the same thing. And so that's what I would say. With our partners in education, whether that's Pima Community College or the U of A, whether that's working with our chamber and our YMCA and our YWCA and all, our SBDC and anyone associated with SBA or SCORE counselors, you name it. It's a team sport, and we're going to all figure out the solutions for that.
So a similar question, Barbara Coffee, Economic Initiatives Director, around the startup and innovation ecosystem. In your mind, what is the appropriate role for the city, Big C, and its departments in the startup ecosystem in launching entrepreneurship? Cities like Sacramento, for example, have launched $10 million seed funds. And a lot of experts in the entrepreneurial space will say private equity, private funding has a hard time maximizing those dollars, and they're experts at it. That there's some levels where the city is out of its depth and where a city can really contribute. I think that there is a role for cities as local governments and jurisdictions to support innovation and entrepreneurship. As you're stepping into your position, what is the appropriate role for the city to play in saying we are a pro-entrepreneurship, pro-innovation economy?
I think the first thing we do is we act as convener, right? So we're making sure and other nonprofits and organizations working toward the same goals, we can kind of take a neutral ground. So we can convene those folks and we can make sure that they are getting access to the people they need, the information they need. Sometimes, and it was interesting when we just had a couple weeks ago, your winners with the Start in Tucson program for Startup Tucson, and we hosted a lunch with the mayor and our economic development team, and we introduced those three teams to the mayor, and instantly there were connections made. It was who knows who, and I can open that door for you, or I'll make that email introduction. And all of a sudden, that simple little Subway sandwich lunch or whatnot, became an opportunity for someone to connect and grow and expand an opportunity. So I think we're good at convening. When we figure out, again, if there are places that we need to be, if there's facilities, something else I'd really like to see happen in Tucson, and that is I want the city to be a place for technology to be tested, right? We could use our own assets and facilities for companies to test technology. Then I think that's a great role we could play. And so we're talking about that with some of our local companies right now, and I'm really excited because when we start doing that, it lets people know that we are here to support business. We're going to help them prove a concept.
Yep.
They're going to be able to launch a business.
In economic initiatives and development, at least in my mind, brand is so important. We talk about the Nikes, the Adidases, the Apples. Cities have brands. I did this exercise with a group of young people the other day, and I showed them pictures of cities, and they could tell me what they felt. They could tell me what they thought. They could tell me by the picture what that city meant to them. And there's times where I think that Tucson has room to grow in developing that brand. And a lot of our branding, this is me editorializing for just a second, really is based on our arts, our culture, our diversity, our tourism. The brand that I'm trying to push and see who bites is Tucson. Your big idea lives here. And it sounds like you and I may be on the same page in the sense of, look, if your big idea is a technology to test, welcome to Tucson. And whether you are a company that has developed it outside of Tucson, you want to test it here, or whether you are a homegrown talent, I think that so much of our economic bandwidth in Tucson is built around brand, and I'm not sure we've coalesced around that brand. It's just a thought.
I like the way you're thinking. Absolutely, I think that is a great strategy. I mean, goodbye saguaro, right? I mean, they're here and it's beautiful and it's a part of the landscape, but the message is something more, and I think you hit on it. We need to let people know what else is possible here by our brand, our image, our identity. So we'll be working on that. As a matter of fact, this summer we're working on a new website to speak to the economic development efforts for the city, and so hopefully we'll have a new platform by the end of the year where everyone can engage and really get a new sense of what business is like to do here, and then it invites business and it invites that activity. So I'm with you on that. Our messaging, it's time for something new.
I have one more question that people will be really mad at me if I don't ask. Do you have another minute or two?
I do.
Okay, super. And it sounds like you have some expertise in it, and I've been in the thick of this conversation in Tucson for 3 years, especially in the urban core, is how do we breathe some areas of new life, and how do we redesign, redevelop some areas of our urban core without damaging or taking away or not preserving our historical heritage. Long before you and I were even on the scene, in my case, long before I was even thought of as a human being, Tucson made some missteps on this front. And those are wounds and pains that are very much present even today in local leadership. What has your experience taught you on how we do redevelopment and redesign while with an eye on preserving history and culture and heritage?
Well, I think it is a delicate balance, right? And certainly there's a lot of history here, and it predates both of us. And so we, without being able to go backwards, right, we need to look at what does that future look like. And I think there is going to be sort of a healthy balance of paying homage to what makes the city unique and its history and protecting some of that, while also encouraging the opportunity for new development. And so it just has to be done in a mindful way. And I think that our city teams have been focused on that in our community and planning development services. I think that it's just going to take hand-holding with developers to get it right. And so I think that that's the work that we do. Where there are vacant properties and opportunities to create something where there is something, underutilized, so to speak, then I do think we need to move forward, do so in a way that's mindful. And so if that means, are looking at height. Where is height most appropriate, but still allowing some density, but doing it in a meaningful way, but allowing for still that opportunity to build in the density that's needed for the success of the hospitality, the restaurant activity, the amenities that people do love. Making it a vibrant place needs to be paramount, but it needs to be done delicately.
Is there a kind of a nuts and bolts policy example that you've been able to put in place from past communities or past experience where you were able to do exactly what you were talking about?
Well, my experience goes back to the Main Street program. So the National Main Street program is a guideline for economic restructuring, as we called it, through historic preservation. So mindful of the Department of Interior, standards for rehabilitation, and using that as a guideline, but not being limited by that, right, either. So still allowing opportunity and development. So one of the things that we do know when we're doing redevelopment is that image is everything. Image is not optional. So people make a judgment about a community by what they see. So it's mostly paying attention to when things are in decline or when they are, they are starting to deteriorate or fall apart or vacant or boarded up, locations, they tend to detract. And so rather than attract. And so what we want to do is be sure that we're aesthetically starting to pay attention to those areas, because again, passersby make an opinion about a community based on that. Plus it brings, crime and other things when you have things that are left in disrepair. So I think that we continue to move forward, but we do it in the most meaningful way possible.
There was a group downtown, and this is where we'll end because I don't want to take your time for granted, Barbra Coffee, Economic Initiatives Director for the City of Tucson. There was an initiative recently where a developer and a community group sat down and said, look, you're working on a mixed-use project, and we'd love to have local businesses in there. We just know that local businesses may not have the financial bandwidth to afford maybe some of the rates that would automatically be put in place. Can we agree on a certain cap for local businesses, a certain percentage of local business, a certain cap on the rental in your space for X amount of years, just to allow for a more built-in diversity of companies? And to me, that's an example of a refreshment and a renewal with a collaboration with the community that maintains some of the organizations that have been there for a long time, who can stay in the area now because there was a constructive relationship. Are those kind of things broadly things that you support and have seen work, and can Tucson expect support from your office on things like that?
Absolutely. That's a great example of how you work together and how you are sort of hand-holding that process so that the developer is talking to the neighborhood and you're getting that kind of result. And Tucson's known for its local business and its unique, mom and pop small businesses that have grown here and become successful, and they absolutely make Tucson the place. So I think it's incumbent upon us to try to create places for them to thrive. And I think that's a great example.
Well, that excites me because I think it takes intentionality on the part of the whole community. And I think it's a call to action for the whole community to take on a collaborative approach. And I think that's something that as a convener, local government can do, and certainly citizens can do if they have the will to do it. That was me editorializing. that may or may not be the opinion of Barbra Coffee, the Economic Initiatives Director from the City of Tucson. I just kind of flow in and out of the editorializing.
I can't disagree on collaboration. That's definitely the way we need to go.
Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for this initial conversation, getting to know you and what you're up to. And I hope this is not the last conversation. And belated welcome to Tucson.
Thank you.
Soon I won't be able to say that anymore. So welcome to Tucson. Much. That's been my conversation with, if there's a website or a place to go, I guess, if someone has a question or a thought or wants to engage with your office, is there a way to do that?
Absolutely. And I would say, definitely reach out, send us an email, but you can go on the City of Tucson's website and look for our Economic Initiatives Department. You'll find our team members there. And I would also mention tonight, we're actually going to be out at Pima Community College for the Thrive in the 05 Business Summit. So for the Oracle and Miracle Mile area businesses, we're asking them to come out and engage with us at 5 o'clock tonight at the downtown campus of Pima Community College. So that's another great opportunity to meet us.
All right. And you can meet Barbra Coffee there.
That's right.
Super. Thank you so much for your time. More to come. Tucson, that was my conversation with Barbra Coffee, the Economic Initiatives Director of the City of Tucson. If you missed any of that interview, you can go back on kvoi.com/podcasts and on iTunes and Google Play Music to hear the full replay. Give it about a day. Check back tomorrow morning, and you can listen to the full replay. We're going to head to a break. When we come back, we'll wrap up with where are startups going? Are they going to the suburbs? Are they going to the city? And why? Some interesting news on that. That'll close out our 10 o'clock hour. And then Andres Portela will be in to talk about housing issues in Tucson in the 11 o'clock hour. Don't go away. We're just getting started. Tucson. Welcome back to the program. Can you hear me? All right. 790-2040 is your opportunity to join in the conversation here on 1030 The Voice. You are listening to the Creative City Show, where we talk about and talk to people and ideas shaping Tucson's future. And we just finished the first interview here of the week on the show with Barbra Coffee, the Economic Initiatives Director for the City of Tucson. She's entering, I think, month 6 of her time here in the city. Has 20 plus years of experience in economic development initiatives, and came most recently from Henderson, Nevada, the Las Vegas area, to Tucson, and is excited about the things that we have here in Tucson that are so intrinsic to who we are as a community. But we had a great conversation about city branding. We had a great conversation about the role of local city government in encouraging startup and tech and innovation, small business friendliness, and we also got into some nuts and bolts around urban core and corridor redevelopment and renovation, and kind of what her view is of that from her office here with the City of Tucson. So a good wide-ranging interview and a real good first introduction, and I'm looking forward to, at her invitation, to have second and third and fourth conversations where we can get into even more detail on some of these themes and what Tucson is good at, what we have. I'm beginning to believe will get people here. Less and less do I see it keeping people here. And so I think we have to figure out this balance of, there was a metaphor thrown around here on this station last week of ice cream and sundae toppings, that we need to make sure that our engine is running as a city to make sure that we can be successful in all these areas of opportunity and living, from our culture and our history and our background as a community, but also our opportunity and our jobs and our housing and our ability to live as a family. So I'm looking forward to my 11 o'clock interview with Andres Portela from the Southwest Fair Housing Council to talk about housing issues in Tucson, because we can get so many things right in Tucson, if we don't get our housing, our supply of housing, our diversity of housing, our cost of housing, our density of housing, if we don't get that formula right, the other areas will struggle. So that's coming up at 11. But I was intrigued by something that I saw this morning. I looked through it enough to be able to bring it up with you here on the air. It's this article written by Richard Florida called "Startups Are Abandoning Suburbs for Cities with Good Transit." Interesting kind of a clickbaitable title, but the idea that mapping data and mapping transit shows that startups would rather be in higher density areas where the public transit is working well and good transit than traditional suburban locations. And it shows that there's a close connection between transit access and startups of all types, not just high-tech startups. In fact, it's the least technologically intensive industries, retail, services, and food, that cluster the most around transit. Again, this is people way smarter than me compiling data and saying, look, when you have a effective transportation and transit system, when the infrastructure is there, you find that there is clustering around these areas, and that startups would rather be, right, the tech industry, this tech economy, startups, innovation, entrepreneurship would rather be in a higher density area with effective transit and transportation than some of the typical options. And there are clear differences, this data shows, between the 5 cities that are shown in this data. I'll post this on social media, but that can include light rail systems, that can include commuter rails, that can include underground city systems, that can be an above surface line like our streetcar here, but the walkable, denser, transit-oriented areas are the areas in our cities and communities today that are attracting and retaining the tech and startup and innovation companies and communities that I think are a necessary piece of a city's portfolio. It's not the holy grail. It's not the baby to keep or throw out with the bathwater, but it is an absolutely necessary element. And again, I want to reiterate the stuff that Tucson is really good at, right? Our food, our service, our retail. We have a strong base in that locally. Again, 14% of Tucson's workforce is employed by the food industry, and 60% of that food industry is locally or independently owned. So this is Tucson. Small business, independent business, locally owned. Those things thrive as well when we get our transit and our infrastructure right. So number one, it's why I talk about it a lot, because it's important. Number two, I think this is also another element why we need to think a little bit more broadly about the Tucson modern streetcar. It's 3.9 miles long. I don't think anybody that you would talk to today would go, that's sufficient. That's the way it's going to be for 50 years. It definitely needs to expand. This research shows why. I'd love to see that thing go up Campbell. I think it needs to go to the airport. I think some of our transit options into the future could make up for some of the mistakes that we've made, quite honestly, by not putting in transportation infrastructure throughout the city over the last 30, 40 years. I think this is an important conversation. And so I think we can look at the streetcar in terms of ridership and who uses it and how much it costs. If it stays the way it is for 5 or 10 years, 15, 20 years, without a plan to expand it fully in place, yes, I think that it is underachieving its potential. But I think the bigger picture is that it is setting the stage for transit-oriented development and entrepreneurship and living that is really, I think, an important piece of our cities and our communities. So just an interesting thing to share with you there. As I dig into it more, I might bring it up again. But just something interesting to think about. That takes us to the end of our hour, Tucson. When we come back, we're going to talk housing in Tucson here on 1030 The Voice. That's going to be our 11 o'clock hour. It's a hot topic. Everybody's talking about it. We're going to talk about it here on the show. Don't go away. 1030 The Voice. See you in a minute.